Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee and meteorologist Joe Rayo, and we're here on the Sunday morning Joe and Joe Weather Show. On, I guess I am going to describe this, Joe, as probably the strangest Labor Day weekend that I could have imagined.
Really?
Yeah, because when you think of all the stuff that's been going on this year, we've been sort of people have been making jokes, and we've been making jokes too about the fact that strange things have been happening, and it's 2020, so with all the stuff with the coronavirus and everything else. And if you take a step back and you look at the weather things that have happened so far this year, yeah, some of them have been strange, but when you sit back and look at them, you think, okay, they're not really outside the realm of probability. Maybe they're kind of stretched a little bit, but they're still kind of in there in the scope of things. But I have to tell you, if you had asked me that on the 6th of September, on Labor Day weekend, that we were going to be sitting here spending a good portion of this show today talking about a major snowstorm in the Central Rockies. That it's not just the snowstorm part of it. It's the fact that, just to pull Denver as an example, Denver is going to set their record tomorrow for most days above 90 degrees this summer at 73. In fact, on top of that, yesterday, Denver hit 100. They're going to hit 100 today, and on Tuesday, they're not going to. They may not only not get out of the 30s, but they may actually be down in the 20s Tuesday night. They're going to get, if they don't get accumulating snow in Denver itself because of whether it whether it's the sun angle or the fact that, my God, if you want to talk about warm ground, I guess this is the one time where it will apply.
Right.
But I mean, there are going to be places that are away, certainly places away from the metro area of Denver. They're going to wind up with a foot of snow out of this. If you'd have said to me that we're talking about this in early September on a Labor Day weekend, I would have said no. There's just, even in the even up in the Northern and Central Rockies, I would have bet against it.
I wish my sister were here to hear your little soliloquy because many years ago, my sister worked for CTW, the Children's Television Workshop. She was getting a tryout actually to become a script writer for Sesame Street. I think that was what she was doing. And she wrote a story with, I think, Grover and Oscar the Grouch or whatever, talking about how hot it was today. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the little sketch, it started to snow. And when she presented this sketch to her boss, the person in the hierarchy of CTW, he looked at her and said, "You're so stupid. What are you trying to do? Get the kids to understand things that are impossible? Very hot, and then all of a sudden it snows. What's wrong with you, or whatever?" And she never did get the job. But I wished if that guy
She ought to
was really
sue
around
now.
now to see what's happening now.
Yeah,
You're right.
she ought to.
Another artifact of 2020.
Right, she ought to sue the guy now.
Yeah.
Either that or email him.
Yep.
Email him this show, the
Right.
link to this show. That ought to
How
set
many
him
how
off.
many days did you say that Denver had 90
70.
degrees?
Well, after tomorrow, because they're going to go to 90 tomorrow. The day before, they're going to go to 90 tomorrow, and
Right.
it'll be 73 days this summer season, not consecutive, but 73 days that they got above 90 degrees, and that
That is
ties their record, I believe.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
We've had what here in New York? 21,
I think 20 or
20,
20
21.
or 21. I think it was for
And
New
we're
York
making a big
City. I
deal
think
out about that.
Philadelphia's in the low 30s or something.
And 73 in Denver. That's
The
awful,
only
awful.
thing I will say is that at the very least, at least in Denver, if it when it's in, I noticed yesterday at one point during the day it was 92, 93, 92 or 93 with a dew point of 32 and a relative humidity of 11%, and a
Well,
breeze
well,
and a south wind. I would imagine that's a lot easier to take than what some of the
it
some
was
of
a
the stuff
dry
we have to
heat.
deal with. Yeah,
It's a dry heat.
but still 90, 92 with a dew point of 32 and an RH of 11% is a hell of a lot easier than, when we get 92 here with a dew point of 68 or 9.
Right. Or
You
even
know,
50. I mean, like we call when it's 92 and with a dew point of 50 here, we say, well, it's
well,
a
it's
nice sight.
reasonable, sure.
I
It's
can't even
comfy.
can't even understand or not understand, but I can't even comprehend dew points in the 30s with temperatures in the 90s. That's
I
crazy.
know it is crazy. By the way, Timothy Veltman points out on the chat board this morning. It's very interesting, but he says he's noticed that if you think it's strange that they had that what's going on in the Rockies, he points out that now again, I guess it's going to be how do you define a major snowstorm? I kind of think that it applies here because of the fact that it's early September. I mean, we're talking about inside the first 10 days of September. To me, if somebody puts down several inches of snow, even if it is in the Rockies and even if it is in elevated areas, I think that warrants a highlight at the very least. But Timothy points out that he's noticed, and it'd be interesting if we could figure out if we could get some kind of broad definition about what a major snowstorm is. That when it happens in the Rockies, it follows up in the Northeast about 6 weeks or so later. So if you want to use that, we're talking about mid to late October for the first Northeast type snowstorm. Not obviously the coast would be really insane if we saw it, but
So,
that's an interesting
well, we'll call it, we'll call
observation.
that, we'll call that, we'll call it Beltman's corollary.
Yeah, that might work. By the way, just want to give a big welcome to everybody watching this morning from the meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app joining us, and also everybody on Facebook. And those of you that can't stay for the whole show, or maybe you can't watch the video for the whole thing. Once it's done, shortly afterward, there'll be a podcast version of this, so you can just stick your earbuds in your ear, and you can find that on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Radio Podcasts, and any one of a number of podcast sources. Just search for Joe and Joe Weather Show using the word "and." By the way, okay.
And of course, you could also point out, Joe, going back to the snow here, that it's going to be progressing southward. In other words,
Yes,
parts of Montana and Wyoming will actually begin getting this tomorrow, and then it will just continue to push southward, and that's when Colorado will be in the crosshairs on Tuesday. So this is a 2-day deal for the Northern and Central Rockies.
correct. So let's start off. I want to start off with something that Ruthless Goat, who is uh, not a goat, but he does occasionally. He can occasionally be ruthless. I've seen it, but he sent me some interesting weather statistics that I thought were worth looking at. And this particular one, again, because he lives up in Loveland, Colorado, which is not too far from Denver. And I'm trying to just get rid of this image here in the upper corner. So we'll come back to the tropics, which are busy in and amongst themselves. But he sent me this very interesting statistic with regards to Denver because, and for this area, because it's not just the fact that there's the early snow, it's the really huge temperature drop that we're going to see there in less than 48 hours time. And these are Denver's largest 2-day temperature changes since 1872. Now there's a chance, and this occurred on December 14th, 2008. There was a 76 degree temperature change from from 58 to minus 18. Now, in mid December, I think that actually is not as strange as it sounds. Okay, it's a big temperature change, but you can kind of visualize if it's mid December, you can certainly see a wintertime setup in the west where you could be in the 50s in there and then jump and drop to 18 below zero in the next 2 day within 48 hours. February 4th, 1996, a 72 degree temperature change in 48 hours from 56 to minus 16. October 10th, the fourth greatest, it was October 10th of last year, a 70-degree temperature change that went from 83 to 13. Okay, that was on October 10th of 2019. On December 10th, 1919, we went from 50 to minus 20. So what we're looking at is the potential from going from 100 to possibly under 30. So there's a chance that we could take out, depending on the time of day. If we hit 100, say at 3 o'clock Denver time in the Mountain time in the afternoon, so by 3 o'clock Tuesday afternoon, it could easily be snowing and 32 or 30 or 29 or 28. Um, we could wind up challenging. Certainly, going to see 70-degree temperature changes, but we may wind up challenging the top three spots here
Wow.
in that part of the country. So I thought
That
that
is,
was a pretty cool statistic.
I think that's amazing. That really is. I can't even fathom of changing 50, 60, 70 plus degrees over a span of 24 to 48 hours. I mean, think about it here in New York, Joe. I mean, what was the most dramatic change in temperature that I could remember in all of the years that I've been watching the weather? And this is even before I became a professional. 1976
The 1 inch
Groundhog
blizzard.
Day. Groundhog Day,
Groundhog's
1976.
Day 1 inch blizzard. I was thinking the same one because that, if I remember correctly, that went from 55 to 9. I don't remember what it was the day before, but on the actual day, it went from 55 degrees to 9 degrees. Let me see, 55. I'm so anal with this. I actually remember the actual hourly temperatures in New York City. It was 55, 45, 35, 23, uh, 16, 10, and 9. So I think it
Right,
was in 6 hours we went
right.
from 55 to 9, and
I
everything
just
just froze solid.
I had one of it in my room. I was living in Throgs Neck at the time, and I had one of these thermometers. It was not even like you know today we're so accustomed to LED thermometers. It was a regular thermometer, but it had indoor outdoor, and the sensor outdoor was just outside of my window in my bedroom.
That was
And
high tech in those days.
I woke up at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I checked the temperature, and I was actually able to see the temperature going down. I mean,
Yeah,
right
I
before
remember
my
that.
eyes, I was watching it going down. I never saw that before,
Yeah, that
and that's how
was.
quickly the temperature was going down.
I got the snowfall forecast, but I got a bunch of maps that I pulled up. I just want just so everybody. This is through Wednesday morning, and then the bulk of this is going to be done by Wednesday morning. But I did pull up the snow forecast map, which hopefully now it's not gonna have disappeared on me because I tried to get a tighter view. Oh, we got the circle of death going round and round and round. So at least from the standpoint of what the Weather Service digital forecasts are showing, I better stay on the tight view because the round one's not come. The tight one, I'm sorry, the wide view because the tight one's not coming in right. But there's a 3 inch print for Denver, and just to the west of Denver, we've got 12 inch plus. And of course, as you said, Wyoming and Montana go first, and we're seeing the snow forecast amounts. Most of the amounts in western Montana aren't anything outstanding. I mean, we're seeing some half foot amounts, and I would imagine that's probably in some of the higher peaks. But you do see more widespread snow in the state of Wyoming on the order of, let's call it several to six, and maybe a little bit higher. But it's the area from southernmost Wyoming down into Colorado, just west of Denver, that winds up with big snows. And there's actually some accumulating snows that pop up in western Kansas, western Nebraska, northeastern New Mexico, and even the two teeny tiny corners of northwest Texas and the Oklahoma Panhandle. So this is a big. I think this is a big deal for this time of year. I'm sure we're going to see news stories about this with regards to the early snowfall. I'm going to be interesting to see. I'm going to be curious to see, Joe, just exactly what sticks to roadways. But I got to think there's two things I got, and I've never been out there, so I really don't know the area too well. I just wonder what we're looking at with regards to wet snow accumulating on trees and what kind of damage that might occur if it's a heavy enough snowfall. The other thing I'm kind of curious about is it came to my mind, the natural expansion and contraction that occurs with heat or cold. So you're talking about temperatures up at 100. They're going to relatively quickly drop down into the 20s. I got to imagine that's going to do something to pavement. I don't know. It just kind of crossed my mind. That's a pretty fast contraction expansion contraction type of thing going on.
Yeah, and we see that often here in the Northeast during especially the middle and latter part of the winter time. We see the cracks, we see the potholes opening up, and yeah, I'm sure that's going to, unless they're using a different form of asphalt out there as compared to what we use here in the Northeast. There's probably going to be a lot of that type of problem coming in the days and weeks to come.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That's just unbelievable.
And of course, within a day or so, most of this is going to be gone because of the time of year, obviously. But just the fact that you to be able to see something like this, I pulled up some various maps. I went to WPC and pulled up their forecast maps, and they're showing, on their forecast maps, all the dark blue snow, even back into parts of Utah, northern New Mexico, uh, uh, western Nebraska, parts of South Dakota, western Kansas, northwest Texas. And of course, you're seeing heavy rain and flash flooding. This is going to be an important low that's going to develop, and it's going to produce on the other side of this, of course, an area of heavy rain, flash flooding, and probably some severe weather in the mix. That's another thing I'm curious about with this upper trough that's dropping southward. Uh, whether there's going to be whether they're going to wind up seeing some thunder snow. I don't know. Again, not forecasting there on a regular basis. I don't know what the frequency of a thunder snow event is like in Colorado. Maybe it's commonplace. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure. So, but it'll be certainly. There's a number of facets here that I'm curious about.
Well, here in the East, we have rapid uplift or a rapid destabilization of the atmosphere, especially in the vicinity of the Great Lakes. When you have very cold air passing over the warm lakes, you tend to get squalls and thunder snow activity in the wintertime. Out in the Rockies, I don't know, maybe a dramatic form of orographic lifting would lead to some cracks of thunder or whatever. You're right. I'm not really too familiar with the
How it
oddities of the
plays,
weather
yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah.
Here's WPC just looking at their forecast map with the weather fronts, and the first push comes down tonight into tomorrow. You see that area of rain in Montana and the stationary front that kind of runs down the Rockies, and there's a big high that's coming down from the north that's going to create east and northeast winds, which is stuff what you need for upslope out there. And then starting tomorrow morning, you start to see a little snow showing up in their forecast across parts of western Montana, and then that area gradually grows. Look at that big high, Joe. It's a 1037 high for early September. That's a pretty strong high that's coming down. So there's some cold air with that clearly, and that's by tomorrow evening. The cold air is now down into Wyoming and not quite yet getting into Colorado, but by Tuesday morning, you have a low developing in on the Texas-Oklahoma border, and there's a 1038 high in northern Montana, and a bunch of screaming easterly isobars that run from the Great Lakes all the way up into the Pacific Northwest. So this really does look like something you would see at least a month, at least 6 weeks from now, and if it would be commonplace in November certainly, or perhaps into into December and through the winter months. But again, I would have said this would have been highly improbable to see it to talk about it on the Labor Day weekend.
Really, really. And I mentioned it a couple of days ago. Didn't we have? Was it last year or the year before? There was an unusually early, heavy snowfall again in the Rockies
Yeah,
and the
it
Plains.
was at the end of the month, and I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, but it was one of the two. I didn't
Yeah,
get a chance to look it up.
yeah.
All right, so here, by the way, here's WPC's. Here's a map you don't get to see too often on a Labor Day weekend, but it's the 72-hour probability of at least 2 inches of snow. And in the brown and red, we're talking about 80 to 100% probability. So this is not a shabby area here of snow or something minuscule. This is a pretty sizable geographic area we're talking about here through my Wyoming and down through central Colorado. I'm going to just put up the 8 inch to see if we have, and even, I mean, here again, the probability of at least 8, and it might very well be in the higher mountaintops, but nonetheless, we're talking about a 40 to 60% probability, according to WPC, of a strand of 8 inches, 8 inch plus snows. So I think this falls into the category of major snowfall for even for the Central Rockies, given where we are on the calendar.
It's crazy. Kind of reminds me of the old Bob and Ray skit when when Ray is interviewing, or when Bob is interviewing Ray. Ray is doing a falsetto voice. He's made believe he's a woman from out in Winnemucca, Nevada, or Bondurant, Wyoming, and he says the weather can get pretty brisk there, can it? And Ray says, "Oh, absolutely. We have winter right into August."
Yeah. Now look at this. I got on Tropical Tidbits. I have pulled up because I just wanted to see with respect to normal. And we're starting out Sunday out in the west with this huge area of above normal temperatures, at least 16 degrees above normal, and in some cases, we're talking about above normal temperatures of 20 to 25 above normal. But watch the blue that comes down through Montana and the Dakotas and just pushes southward. Now we're into Monday night. So on the other side of this, you're seeing temperatures that are running, uh, looks like, from just judging from the scale, 15 or more degrees below normal and even higher. And then when we get to Tuesday, as that cold air pushes down through Colorado and points southward, we're looking at anomalies of 30 or more degrees below average here by the time we get to Monday evening. I'm sorry, Tuesday evening. I mean, those are insane anomalies for this time of year.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I'm shaking my head. I mean, it's Labor Day weekend, and it's crazy.
It is. So let's just to we'll look at the upper air, and this we've been talking about the fact, Joe, that all through the month of August we've seen these deep troughs set up in the eastern part of the United States, and this one initially looked like it was going to do the same thing, but gradually everything kind of moved over further west by about 600 or 700 miles, or even more, and now you've got one of these rather deep powerhouse troughs that's dropping southward, and we're talking about some pretty cold air. I mean, this is very cold air aloft.
And that's about as positively tilted a trough as you can possibly get, right?
Right. And Joe, when Joe talks about a positively tilted trough, if you look at the axis of the trough, folks, it goes pretty much northeast southwest. So that's a positive tilt, as opposed to a trough that would angle northwest to southeast. And this trough is dropping southward and strengthening. The bottom part of the trough actually, Joe, forms a cutoff low, which
Yeah,
is right in here, right into southern Colorado. So usually it's close to where the track of that cutoff low is, where you wind up seeing some of the heavier snowfalls, or perhaps just north of where the upper low is. Again, the terrain, the area there, I'm not 100% familiar how things play out, because in Colorado, your elevation, you live at the 850 millibar level, so you're already starting out at a mile up.
right.
So things do have a way of behaving a bit differently. But
how do you if you buy the standard barometer, what do you do with the standard barometer when it's constantly pointing toward like 28.2
yeah,
inches?
you have to do a correction. You have to do a
Yeah,
big correction, and of course, if you're up there, if you're baking stuff, that pressure has a problem. You got to adjust your recipes and baking time in order to, if you're putting something in the oven and you want it to come out right. So yeah, it's got to be a little bit weird. So here's this upper low. I mean, this is a fairly wrapped up, deep upper air low that drops down into, eventually winds up in Kansas, and it just sits out there. And of course, eventually it opens up. But the problem is, and we're in a good place here because of it, because all the troughing is in the west. Here in the east, we've got a nice ridge off the east coast. We're enjoying this gorgeous weekend weather that we've had with blue skies and sunshine, the low humidity. That's going to continue into tomorrow. The humidity is still going to be pretty reasonable, but this deep trough in the west has assured us of some what looks like could be a relatively dry. I would say at least into midweek. I'm a little cautious to the end of the week because of some of the tropical stuff that's going on off the East Coast, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on.
yeah. I mean, somebody would be looking at all this and saying, well, won't that trough, like a gigantic pendulum, won't eventually the trough and the upper low and all this mayhem out west swing into the east and bring us unsettled weather by, let's say, mid or late week? The problem is that this ridge that's predominant here in the east right now is going to cause all of that mayhem to shear off and stay off to our west and north. So yeah, we it looks like it's going to stay dry here at least through Wednesday, maybe even Thursday, and the next chance for any kind of unsettled weather may not come until the end of the week. So as we were talking about at the end of last week, Joe, on Thursday, before we took a couple of days off, we could very well have a nice stretch of dry weather here, and that, considering how wet July and August was, that's not too bad as we
No,
move into the early part of September.
yeah, GFS, there's your low, a 990 low in southern Colorado, and look at that area of snow that it generates through Wyoming and into Colorado, and as we said, also into parts of New Mexico, northwest Texas, northwest Oklahoma, western Kansas. I mean, this is just this is amazing. I just find it amazing. I'm going to run through just a couple of maps real quick, and then we're going to shift. We're going to shift our emphasis back to the east and take a look. But as far as snowfall is concerned, since we're inside 72 hours, it's probably not going to be too far off. But you see how extensive the GFS has some of the higher amounts of 6 to 12, and maybe even a few places a foot plus from Wyoming. I see, I don't see any huge prints on this, but certainly you see the heavy snow in between the print numbers that they have. From Wyoming down into northwest Texas, southeast Colorado, western Kansas. I'm going to switch to the NAM. I just want to take a look really fast at what the NAM is doing with this. And then the NAM actually has an even larger area of snow that goes a bit further south down into New Mexico, but it still has roughly the same idea. So you folks out in Colorado, you got your heat, you're in your pool, your heat today with temperatures at 100. You're in your swimming pool. You'll be in your swimming pool on Monday, and you'll be in your skis and winter coats on Tuesday. I got to think, Joe. The human body acclimates very easily to stuff. Okay, um, I got to think the human body is going to be a little bit shocked. That's got to feel painful if you've got been used to all these 90-degree days, and of course the recent run of 100-degree temperatures there, and then all of a sudden you're going to go down into the 20s and 30s. I mean, that has got to hurt. It really just has to hurt.
And I haven't looked beyond Tuesday or Wednesday, but on the chat board, Joe Miano writes, then by next weekend, Denver will be back in the 80s.
Yes, because when I looked at the anomalies. I'll bring them back up. That's correct because when you look at the anomalies after the middle part of next week, uh, hold on, get the GFS because they goes out further, and get the old GFS because the new one just started. But yeah, we take it out after that upper trough pulls out. You still have below normal temperatures into Friday, But after that, going into the weekend, you're back up to near average, and by next week, it's back all above normal in the western part of the United States. So yeah, he's right. You're going to go back up. You're going to go back up out of your skis and into your pool. By
What do you do to your pool when you've got temperatures like today in the 90s, and then you're expecting temps in the 30s and 20s with snow on
I
top
don't
of
think
it?
there's a problem there because I mean I don't think there would be a problem. Your pool water temperature's got to be warm. Uh, Although I gotta wonder, the nights out there can also get pretty cool even on the hottest days. So I
Yeah.
wonder if I don't know. Do people have heaters for their pool? I imagine they would. If you keep the water, if you're not talking about a freeze here that's going to just you know all of a sudden go down below zero and everything freezes up. So I would imagine if it's for a day or two, it's not going to be too big a deal. I would imagine.
You also have to think about wildlife. Like, for example, um, I mean, here I have hummingbird feeders, and another week or so, I'm going to have to take the feeders down for the season because they instinctively know the ruby throat hummingbirds east of the Mississippi. They instinctively know when to start heading south toward the Gulf of Mexico and South America or
Also,
whatever.
they don't wait till the fares go down. They
They
just
just
go.
go. But I mean, like, there's a wide variety of hummingbirds out in the West, and you got to wonder what do birds like that do during exceptionally cold? They can't tolerate cold weather in the 20s. So where do they go? What do they do? I mean, it's
Yeah. Usually the animals figure it out. Um, Remember back where they with the tsunami. I, I forgot where it was, but they talked about how the animals all they just all went inland like the
right.
day or two before you saw them all going inland. And we also know you notice it here with tropical storms and hurricanes. Sometimes when you get a threat or something's going to come close, that you can see the birds are flying northwest and going inland, further and
Right.
further inland. I certainly remember seeing that with Sandy, watching the gulls coming in and just going inland. So
Yeah.
they seem to sense some. They seem to be able to sense the weather changes. They're far more sensitive than we are. Maybe once upon a time, human beings were far more sensitive to the upcoming weather changes than they are now, when they were more in touch with the nature
Right.
than they
Right.
are. So I got the upper air for the GFS going forward. Looking at the models going forward for us, and of course, we had this upper trough that moved through late last week. We got our nice cool down. Here's the digging trough that digs mostly to our west. Wound up, the trough axis started off at 80 last week and now wound up more like 100. So it was 100 degrees west. So this thing wound up being way to the left. So until we get that busy Canadian jet, it is one of these time periods where it's kind of pushed up further to the north. So we have this upper high off the east coast, and we have to wait for that to kind of flatten out. And Joe, you said earlier how the system opens up from the Rockies and then heads up to the Great Lakes, so there really isn't much impact here. It looks like the next cold front comes through at some point next weekend, and then if you look at the long range, that there's troughing along the east coast that pulls out, then the next one comes down, and you know so it's more the same stuff. Things are moving along, so we're going to look for some ups and downs along the way, but this week looks relatively, at least for now, looks relatively uneventful.
Uneventful indeed.
I didn't think, by the way, I don't think it gets terribly hot either. With the high going where it is offshore, the flow's going to be kind of light east southeast off the ocean. That's probably going to keep temperatures in check to an extent. We'll get back into the 80s, but I don't see us pushing up into the 90s out of this during this week.
Right. Right. Well, on the other, I was about to say it's a little late in the season now for temperatures in the 90s, but then I remember back just last year when Central Park hit 93 on October 3rd. So,
Yeah. Oh no, I mean it's not impossible if you get the ridges in the right spot. I just don't think the high is in the right spot this time around. Now, the one thing I would just point out is a little bit of tropical moisture that is going to shoot out of the Atlantic. I'm just running through I'm waiting for the surface map to load, and you can see here in the east. But you'll notice, Joe, there's there's a system out, and the Hurricane Center actually talked about this. There's a wave near Bermuda that's moving west northwestward. They're not anticipating this to develop. They have the probabilities as low. But because you got this high that's sitting south of Nova Scotia and easterly isobars into the southeastern part of the United States, pressures are going to be a bit on the low side off the southeast coast. And there's also going to be a little bit of that tropical moisture that's going to try to move in toward the end of the week. And you see the GFS sort of has it in a small way, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and then Wednesday afternoon and evening in the in North and South Carolina. It's not any big deal, but I want to just sort of keep an eye on that, because that might be the one thing that puts a bit of a fly in the ointment for the end of the week. And then here comes our cold front, which sort of gets through, but not quite, around Saturday, Sunday of next weekend. I'm kind of thinking, why don't we just wait to see how the system in the west comes out and what happens along the East Coast before we started venturing out too far into the long range.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, by the way, the next four names on the hurricane list, in case you're wondering, because there are, if you go on nhc.com, National Hurricane Center, there are, those four potential areas.
Yeah, right. We're going to look at those.
So if they do develop into tropical cyclones, we have Paulette, Renee, Sally, and Teddy.
Right, and Renee is a male Renee, not a female Renee.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So here's our. I'm going to bring up the tropical satellite in a second. I just want to point out that there's some rather strong thunderstorm activity going on at the moment. We're coming up on 11:40 Eastern Time, 11:40 a.m. Eastern Time. So just in case you're watching this later on, if you've got severe weather questions for your particular area, remember to go to weather.gov for the latest weather information in your local National Weather Service office. But we do have some hefty thunderstorms here that are moving southeastward in the Great Lakes. You can see it here on the radar. I wonder if there's there's a pretty strong line through central Illinois here that's moving southeastward. Some heavy downpours in and around the Chicago area, and that complex continues to move to the southeast at a fairly decent clip here, heading into Indiana and southeastern Illinois. So SPC, very quickly, with respect to severe weather risks, has the area around the Great Lakes at a slight risk of severe weather, but much of what's going on has already moved out of that and into the marginal risk zone further to the south. And with respect to tomorrow, the SPC has a marginal risk in a narrow band from western Pennsylvania, northwest PA, westernmost New York, westward, just a narrow sliver there through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and then back through northern Missouri, southern Iowa. And I don't think they have any severe weather. They do have thunderstorms indicated for parts of Wyoming and Colorado for tomorrow into Tuesday morning. And on day 3, which is Tuesday into Wednesday, there's no severe weather indicated anywhere. And in fact, no thunderstorms indicated from the Gulf states, except for the immediate Gulf Coast and Southeast Coast. No thunderstorms at all indicated from there all the way up to Maine.
Yeah.
So we're liking that.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so let's go to the tropics.
It's lovely. I don't think I can remember, Joe, at any time this summer seeing on the 3-day outlook from SPC, at least one of those 3 days we are in either general thunderstorm coverage or some kind of threat for thunderstorm activity. I cannot remember stringing together 3 consecutive days where there's nothing that's predicted for us. So it's lovely.
Not a thing, not a flake, not an ice pellet, nothing. All right, so let's point out what the Hurricane Center is looking at on the satellite. And I think, Joe, if you look at this loop, that this system right in here in the tropical Atlantic looks like there's a circulation there and may become a tropical depression pretty soon, judging from how that looks on the satellite. Definitely some turning going on there. So we might see the Hurricane Center do something with this if not later today, perhaps tonight or tomorrow morning. with regards to making this the next tropical cyclone. And also, there's a wave coming off the African coast that you watch the loop here. I'll take the little circles I drew, I'll take those off. They're spinning there too. So we've got two Cape Cabo Verde type systems here that are going to be part of the equation going forward. Although I don't see, there's not a whole lot of push here. They don't seem to be moving westward very quickly. The system up in the near Bermuda, right there, is something that the Hurricane Center's mentioned and forecasting that to actually move west northwestward because it's underneath the big high that's going to be off the coast of Nova Scotia. And the other system is a tropical wave that is in the central Caribbean, moving westward. And that looks like it's going to be running into a little bit of wind shear. We're looking at the clouds on the loop in the upper air in the Western Caribbean. Usually that area is fairly favorable for development, but I'm seeing clouds going from west to east in the higher levels of the atmosphere. So thinking the environment there will probably be a bit hostile. But this one here is the one in the central tropical Atlantic. I think that's going to be the first one that winds up going to becoming a depression because it does look fairly. It looks like it has gotten better organized overnight and this morning.
It looks like we may be looking at Paulette.
We could be. We could very well be. I don't know where we are now in terms of whether it would be the earliest P storm. I kind of stopped looking at that at that round of statistics.
There's somewhere on the internet I saw about a week or two ago. There was a listing of all of the earliest names,
Yeah,
and
I saved the image on my phone, but I don't have my phone in front of me, so I'll have to go look it up after the show is done.
well, we're
The
probably still ahead of this game.
Yeah, just the long range upper air. Uh, just to follow up on with these tropical systems, those of you who look at this stuff on a daily basis, the weather geeks among you, uh, you're jumping from run to run, and you're seeing these models having a really tough time handling what's going on in the tropics. I think there's a number of reasons for it. I think there's a couple of mid-level systems that are out there, and that is throwing a little bit of a monkey wrench into how the models are handling things. And the other thing I would point out is that with the waves, these systems so close together, I think the models are just having a difficult time figuring out, okay, which one is going to be dominant, which one is going to kind of dictate what the other ones do. There have been runs where they do all these weird Fujiwara things and start spinning around each other. So I would just sort of take a back seat and let the systems develop. And remember the idea of the overall trend is the fact that you do have general ridging in the Atlantic from east to west. So that is going to favor these systems moving westward, at least for a while. There are some holes in that along the way, but I'm not really taking too seriously whatever the models are doing. So, because there was one run, Joe, yesterday that had a Category 4 hurricane somewhere around 30 and 70 and moving
I saw that.
northwestward. So you're going to see that on one run. It disappears on the next, or you wind up seeing something out much further to the east. I would just say we're going to watch. We're just going to watch to see how all these waves and how they develop, how it all plays out. I don't see any major changes in the upper air pattern going forward in the U.S. And I would just again point out the fact that with these vigorous troughs, and on this morning's run, you had one. Now we're talking about mid-month, almost to the 18th, 19th, 20th of the month. Another major trough that the model on last night's run carves out from the Great Lakes down into the Gulf states. Whether that's real or not remains to be seen. But just the fact that it keeps doing that, I go back to what I said last week. As long as we keep seeing the models trying to drop troughs into the eastern part of the United States, I think it's probably a wise thing to pay attention to what's happening in the tropics.
And you're right about that Category 4 storm yesterday. I noticed that on the Zero Z run, that system that's just near the Cabo Verde Islands kind of intensifies over the next week, and supposedly then makes the big turn to the north in the mid-Atlantic. And that could just as well change later today with the 12Z run. So
Right. And
this
then
is
last night's European, I don't know if you saw this, but I'll just bring that up in terms of the surface on day 10, which is next Wednesday. Joe, you've got one, two, three, and the fourth one. You've got a parade of four of them across the tropical Atlantic.
yeah.
And of course, being as this is 2020, as I said the other day, naturally the outcome would be uh, a turn. Each one will follow the other one up the east coast of the United States. Heaven forbid. And I'm kidding. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm just saying. This is a strange year, so if something like that were to happen, we've had two back-to-back over short periods of time on the East Coast. 1955, Connie and Diane, and into North Carolina, in almost the same spot, in and around between Wilmington and Hatteras, 3 days apart. You had two major hurricanes that came inland, so that it's rare, but it's not unusual. But again, I'm just illustrating the strange times that we live in.
They are those two storms, by the way, are covered. Any of you who are Isaac Asimov fans, the famous science writer and science fiction writer, he wrote a two-volume. I think eventually, before he died, he added a third volume, his autobiography. And like one volume is like 800 pages. The second volume is one I have is like 850, 900 pages. Anyway, if you read through that autobiography of his, whenever there was some significant or major weather events, he got very detailed, and he does mention those two storms, Joe, Connie and Diane, in 1955, and how he was living in Massachusetts back then, how he was so upset about the fact that he lost power, got it back, and then all of a sudden the next hurricane came and he lost power again, and he was getting ready to pull his hair out. It was rather frustrating to live in that time. Funny thing is, he mentions blizzards. He said he once took a bus trip from Boston to New York in the middle of one of the big blizzards of 1960-61. I said to myself, how is it possible to go and take a bus trip during a blizzard? But apparently he did. It's kind of weird. And there were two snowstorms he mentions in '56, right around the vernal equinox. I think around March 18th and again on the 20th. And he says he measured 3 feet of snow with the first storm. And then 2 days later, he measured again. He must have been measuring drifts. He said, I measured 4 feet in my driveway. But could you imagine these events? You talk about today, and people talk about global warming and climate change and all of the odd weather that we've seen in our time. And yet, read Isaac Asimov's book, and you'll see that in the 1950s, they had some really crazy weather with back-to-back hurricanes and back-to-back big snowstorms and back-to-back this and that. So yeah, I don't know. It's
Whatever.
nature gets into a pattern where sometimes it just decides it's going to throw everything at us at once. And
Right.
1950 was one example.
I would, and I usually when I'm asked about this, I always say you cannot look at any one particular event and ascribe it to climate change. Now, when you have a bunch of them spread over 20 or 30 years, then you've got something that you can look at, and then you can look at statistics. But to point at one thing, no matter how strange it might be, to point at that one thing and say that that is a result of climate change, global warming, or whatever you want to call it. Weather and climate are two different things. So it's and in a conversation that I was having with Ruth Lisco, and he made a very good point, and I saw this in one of his posts. It's also not a linear thing. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that because the atmosphere, why, if somebody might look at this and say it doesn't make any sense to say that the atmosphere is warming and at the same time I'm making snowballs in September. Okay,
Right.
because there's your mind is going to where it's warm, so how could it be snowing? But a warming atmosphere can hold more moisture, and of course, if you've got put some cold air in the mix, it doesn't necessarily mean that the atmosphere warming, that it's not cold enough somewhere. But you put the right dynamics into the mix, and you get cold air down at the surface and all the rest of it. then yeah, you could have a warming atmosphere, and at the same time, you could also have a snowstorm. And you and I have both talked about the fact that over the last 20 years, the number of 20 to 30 inch snowstorms in our area, in our coastal areas of the Northeast, has increased markedly. It's very
Right.
hard to find snowstorms of that magnitude prior to the year 2000. Now,
Right.
it's been 20 years of that stuff. Is it climate change? Is it global warming? Is it cyclical? Is it the fact that back in the day it was far less populated and you had far less weather information? Maybe there were those 20 and 30-inch snowfalls. They just happened to fall where there wasn't anybody around to measure it. We don't know. So
When you said
it's a puzzle.
when you said making snowballs in September, I thought of that line from that one Bugs Bunny cartoon. I forget exactly what it was, but he was talking to a character that I think was in the moment. It was not a regular character, and Bugs is talking, and Bugs is making a snowball, and the character is saying to him, "Hey, how come you can make snowballs in the summertime?" And Bugs says, "Well, you see, Doc, it's too cold to make them in the
Winter
winter."
time. All right, so let's do a little Briller Jeopardy. Scott Briller is enjoying himself on a beautiful weekend on the Jersey Shore, so we wish him well. But he left us with a Batman Briller Jeopardy today. So
Uh-oh.
um, uh, we've got the list of villains,
Right,
and
there was like 66 of them, right?
yes, so and if we can name the actors that played them, he didn't send me the answers to these, but well, I guess we could just some of them I know, and some of them I'm having a tough time. So maybe between the two of us, we could figure this out. You ready?
All right.
The Puzzler.
The Puzzler.
I'll tell you what. Let's do it this way, Joe. When we do them, since you got a a freer hand than I do, you can maybe Google it, the answer as we go. We Google the answers as we go along.
Good.
Okay. After
All right.
all right. So the puzzler. I'm going to say David Wayne was the puzzler.
Okay. I'm doing the
All right.
Googling right now.
Okay. So the next one after that, and I'm having a tough time remembering this.
No, no, it was not
No,
David Wayne.
who was it?
I'll give you a hint. He was on Bewitched.
Oh, Maurice Evans.
Maurice Evans was the
All right,
puzzler.
okay. I was trying to put the face to it, and I remember, yeah, Maurice Evans.
Right.
He played he played Samantha's father.
Right.
Right. Um, okay, so all right, so it was Maurice Evans. Nora Clavicle. I have no. I mean, I remember the villain, but I can't. I'm having a tough time putting a face to this.
Nora Clavicle.
Yeah.
Ah, God. Nora Clavicle and the Ladies Crime Club uses her influence to have Commissioner Gordon, Chief O'Hara, and the whole police force fired and replaced with women.
Oh,
And
I
she
remember that episode. Yeah.
she cut ties with Batman and then launches her plan to blow up Gotham City with explosive packed mice and collect the insurance.
Who was the actress?
I'm looking, I'm trying to find the name of the actress. I can't find the name of the actress. Uh, it doesn't say who. Wait a minute. Launch Nora Clavicle, Miss Clavicle's fire the. Could you believe this? It goes through the entire summation here, but it doesn't tell me who the actress is. Hold on, I'm going to go to
All right.
another
Well,
site.
you look up that. The next one is Kabbalah.
Kabbalah,
Cabale. I don't
played by
remember.
Barbara Rush.
Barbara Rush. Oh, okay. So now there's Kabbalah.
Kabbalah.
Cabala.
God. Like his wife, Kabbalah never officially appeared in the Kabbalah's name, possibly derived from the concept of Kabbalah, sometimes spelled with a K.
Right.
Um, we already did Dr. Cassandra, did we, or did we not?
That's coming.
Um, Real name Kabbalah, male alias, relatives. Who played him? It just goes to show you, though, also that Scott must have had a whole lot of time on his hands
Right,
to
exactly.
look
All right,
to, to look up these names up.
let's skip that one. The next one is Minerva, and I'm thinking that was Carolyn Jones.
I think so. I remember Minerva. Not to be confused with Miss Minerva from Diver Dan. Yeah, it was Carolyn Jones.
Okay, Lord Marmaduke
She was, by the
Fogg.
way, she used, by the way, Minerva used a health spa in Gotham City as her hideout.
Right, Lord Marmaduke Fogg. Now I'm seeing two possibilities in my memory, and I'm thinking Roger C. Carmel
Uh,
or or an actor that goes back to the 30s and 20s, and I'm having a really tough time remembering his name. And when you say it, I'm gonna go, yeah, because I actually, if it's who I think it is, I actually met him in New Orleans a couple of
I
not
will
too
give
many months
you
before he died.
I'll give you a hint who the actor was.
Okay.
I'm just a vagabond lover. That was his one big hit tune, and he was a very famous radio. Uh, I wouldn't say comedian, but a very famous radio personality in the 1930s and
Yeah,
40s.
I mean that's who I'm thinking it is, and I can't remember. I can't. His name is not coming to my brain, and I met this person in the 80s.
And his first name is also the first name of a famous mayor of New York.
You got me. Go ahead.
Rudy
Rudy
Valley.
Valley, yes. Oh, that's what it was. Rudy Valley. I met Rudy Valley in 1986.
That was
and
literally just before he died.
Yes, it was a few months before he died. He lived in New Orleans, and he was part of a Mardi Gras carnival crew one of the big ones. And they were getting ready to do the parade for Mardi Gras. I had a nice conversation with him, and Rudy Valley also was in one of my favorite movies, playing a surgeon in I Remember Mama.
Right.
And so yeah, that was Rudy Valley. I was struggling here since I couldn't remember the name. Lady
Lord Marmaduke
Marmaduke
Fogg
Fogg,
and his sister,
Lady
Lady Penelope
Penelope Pisu.
Soup.
I'm gonna say that was Glynis Johns.
I don't I don't have yes, yes indeed. There
Glynis
you go.
Johns.
Glynis
Okay.
Johns. Right.
Lady Lasagna.
Boy, they were digging deep for these criminal names, weren't they?
Right.
Lady Lasagna?
Yeah.
I'm laughing. I'm trying to type the name. Uh the lasagna lady. No. I said I wanted Batman.
Well, did you type
I just
Batman Lady Lasagna?
I came up with lasagna lady. She offered free lasagna to anyone who. No, this is not who I was looking for. I
All right. Well, it's
uh,
spelt
I
by
know
the,
how it's spelled. I can spell lasagna, Joe, but
okay.
Michelle Brenner, known as the lasagna lady, has baked hundreds of lasagnas. No,
Okay, so maybe
that's not who. That's
that's
not who
not
I'm
who it's.
looking for.
By the way, just really quick, I just want to say thank you to Shraggy Stern for hitting super chat on this Sunday. Joe and I really appreciate. He says, "I'm not
Yes,
asking anything, just saying I love your videos. Like never before. It's better than good. Thank you for the kind words, sir. I
thank you,
really, Joe and I really do appreciate it.
thank you,
All right, now
Scraggy.
so now let's go back to Batman. So we'll put Lady Lasagna on hold. Calamity Jan.
Calamity Jan.
Jan, Jan.
Uh, Calamity Jan. I never heard of some of these.
Yeah, I mean they must have been. Um, they must have been. By the way, Joe, I meant to do
Dina Merrill.
Dina Merrill. Okay. And by
And
the
it was a
way,
two-part, and these were two-part episodes: The Great Escape and The Great Train Robbery.
by the way,
Yeah.
I wanted to mention. It comes up better now. By the way, this entire segment that we're doing here is brought to you by none other than Mrs. Bundy. Mrs. Bundy from Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. No one could wear an outfit better than she could.
Mrs. Bundy.
It's the end of the world.
Hey, by the way, I don't know if you saw it on my Facebook page. Somebody sent me there was an invasion of grackles at an M Mart in Texas, and it was something right out of The Birds. It was really like scary.
By the way, ladies, oh, I'm sure I've seen that happen here, but Lady Lasagna was played by Ethel Merman.
Lady Lasagna was played by, and Calamity Jan was played by Dina Merrill. She was the henchwoman of and devoted fiance of Shame, played by Cliff Robertson.
Amazing.
And the willing of an able lieutenant in his gang of modern day desperados.
Okay, so the next one is the Minstrel.
The Minstrel. You know, some of these names are familiar. I mean, aside from the regular ones like the Joker and whatever. The Minstrel. Well, the Minstrel was also a guest on I Love Lucy during the Hollywood run of I Love Lucy.
I can kind of see him. I can kind of see him, but I can't put my
Lucy was trying to impress Carolyn Appleby and went down to the club and
Van Johnson
and ended up
Van Johnson. Okay, so Dr. Cassandra Spellcraft. The Archer we know was Art Carney.
Right.
Dr. Cassandra Spellcraft. I remember the name, but I don't. While you're looking that up, the next one's easy. The next one's Sandman is wasn't that Dr. Somnambula? Sandman wasn't that Michael Rennie?
I think so. Dr. Cassandra Spellcraft was played by Ida Lupino.
Okay, Ida Lupino. Olga, Queen of the Cossacks, was Anne Baxter.
Right.
Chandel was none other than Liberace.
Wasn't Olga, by the way, teamed with Egghead?
Yes, in one of the more exceptional episodes. Martha, Queen of Diamonds. I remember, but I remember the villain. I'm having trouble putting the face to it. Joan Collins was the Siren.
The Siren. She wore a dress that looked like aluminum foil wrapped around her body.
Right. The Black Widow was Tallulah Bankhead. Mr. Freeze we got the other day, so that was Eli Wallach and Otto Preminger. Colonel Gum was Roger C. Carmel.
Sent you the answer sheet. Goes to both of you.
Oh, really?
Who does?
Scott Briller, according to Renata, who is alerting me.
Yeah, I know. I heard the Macy's page in the background.
She says that she just sent me the answer sheet. I sent you the answer. Tell Joe.
Okay, hang on. Okay, so they're but it's on a website though, so it's a little tough for me to sort through these. Well, I'll tell you what, Joe. We've gone through a bunch of them. I think
Puzzler was Maurice Evans. Nora
Clavicle. Okay, I see.
Minerva was Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Kabbalah was Howard Duff.
Okay.
Minerva was Zsa Zsa.
Right.
Rudy Valley, as you said. Penelope Pea Soup was Glynis Johns. Lola Lasagna was Ethel Merman. Calamity Jan was Dina Merrill. The Minstrel was Van Johnson. Art Carney. Dr.
Chandel was Liberace.
Olga, Queen of the Cossacks, was Anne Baxter. Liberace. Marcia, Queen of Diamonds, was Carolyn Jones.
Right.
So who did we say was the Minerva? Well, who was Minerva?
Minerva was
Minerva was Zsa Zsa, so we got that one. We messed that one up, but we knew Carolyn was in there somewhere. The Siren was Joan Collins. Black Widow was Tallulah. Mr. Freeze. Oh, George Saunders. I forgot. There was three George Saunders. I believe Otto Preminger and Eli Wallach also played the role. Roger C. Carmel was Colonel Gum. Zelda the Great was Anne Baxter also. Shame was Cliff Robertson. Ma Parker was Shelley Winters. Walter Slazak was the Clock King. I forgot about the Clock King. False Face was Malachi Throne, and he's not credited. When
Right.
you watch the show, there's a question mark that comes up. John
Right.
Astin was the second Riddler. Frank Gorshin was the first. David Wayne was the Mad Hatter. That's what it was.
Right.
Milton Berle, Louis the Lilac. Um, Catwoman was played by Eartha Kitt, the last one. Julie Newmar played the Catwoman for the other episodes.
But in
Lee,
the Batman movie, it
Lee
was played by
Merriweather.
Lee Merriweather. Right.
Roddy McDowell, Bookworm. Victor Buono, King Tut. Mr. Freeze was Eli Wallach. Mr. Freeze was Otto Preminger. Vincent Price was Egghead, and arguably the smartest of all the villains.
Exquisite.
Cesar Romero, my personal favorite, is the Joker, because if you look really close, you can see through his makeup and see his mustache, which he would not shave for the role. Burgess Meredith as the Penguin, and he shows up. He was in 20 episodes, which is more than any of the other villains. And Julie Newmar, the original Catwoman, and Frank Gorshin got an Emmy nomination for playing the Riddler. Yes, exactly.
Would you believe my son gave me this? I'm not sure for Christmas or
Oh, I love that. The Cesar Romero bobblehead. That's
Yep.
awesome.
Isn't that amazing?
And Scott
And
Briller hit super chat today, which Joe and I say thank you very, very much indeed. So anyway, since our audience is dwindling away on a Labor Day Sunday because they want to enjoy the nice weather, or if they're watching from Colorado, they're getting ready or Wyoming, they're getting ready for their early September snowstorm, I think it's time for us to say goodbye.
I think it is. We've gone how long? 66 minutes, Joe.
Yeah,
On a
we've actually
Sunday
gone longer a few times, but for a Sunday,
Yeah.
it was a fun show today. So it's good when we have fun shows on a Sunday. So don't
Let me
forget.
say one last
ahead.
thing before we cut. I watched last night The Honeymooners.
Mhm.
At 11:30 on Pix 11, they had the episode with August Gunther, the donut magnate, who came
Yes.
with his wife, and they visited the Cramden's apartment because they lived in that apartment when they first got married. And the thing that blew my mind was that Mr. Gunther told the Cramdens they were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. Now, my wife and I have been married for 36 years, and I looked at my wife when we were watching this last night. I said, "In 4 years, is that what we're going to evolve into?" Because the couple that played that role, the Gunthers, looked like they were elderly. They looked like they were in their 70s or 80s, and they'd been married 40 years. And she said back in the 50s, people were not really aging as well as they do in
That's quite true. That's quite true. I can remember. Of course, your mind is skewed as a child, but I think that's absolutely true. I think when you go back into the 50s and 60s and the 40s, people didn't live as long as they did now. It was kind of unusual to have folks living past their 80th birthday. If you knew somebody that was in their 80s, that was like a big deal.
But Joe,
But
growing up with I Love Lucy and The Honeymoon, I mean, to see the Mertzes celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary, making a big deal out of it, and last night seeing this elderly couple 40th anniversary, and I'm looking at my wife and saying, we must be doing something right.
Well, it doesn't mean that they didn't get. You're making the assumption that they got married in their teens, in their late teens and early 20s, which was actually more common in those times. But maybe maybe the characters got married. Maybe Mr. Gunther married after he became a success. Maybe they married when they were in their 30s.
And the key line in that episode is when Mrs. Gunther turns to Mr. Gunther and says, "Look, dear,
Yes.
the apartment looks exactly the same. Nothing has changed."
Exactly. All right, let's let it go because people want to do stuff outdoors, and so do I. So we'll see you tomorrow, 7:00 Eastern time on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And again, you can always listen to the show as a podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a whole host of other podcast sources. Just search for Joe and Joe Weather Show. All right, have a great day, folks. We'll see you.